Welcome back to ESBR Boxing. It's a pleasure to have Owen with me today. We're here, just a quick reaction video to the big interview. Went live last night. Of course, it's Conor Benn on Piers Morgan. As I said, got Owen here with me. Owen, thanks a million for coming on, mate. Safe to say this interview's generated a fairly big response. Not sure how much of it's positive, how much of negative. I'm sure we'll get into that in a bit. Just your initial reaction. We'll get into some specific talking points a bit later on, but just as a whole, what's your initial reaction to the interview?
I think he's gone in with the sort of the thought process of it, he's going to come out of it shining, and it is just completely the opposite. I think he's made himself look even worse. Painted himself in a worse light. I know, obviously, we'll get into it, but some of the statements he said, he's setting himself up for arguably the biggest failure I've ever seen in terms of the statements he's made. It was just weird. I just felt like it was one big circle, really. Felt like a merry-go-round. We were just going round and round in circles, and I don't really feel like they got anywhere with it.
One of the sort of bigger talking points in the interview was this 270-page document that's apparently filled with evidence that'll clear his name, which he's handed into the WBC, but they've taken a different line of reasoning as to why they've reinstated him to the rankings, but he's refused to hand it to the British Board of Control, and he's refused to obviously release it publicly. And then when Piers pressed him on this, he said it was just down to his pride, which didn't seem to make a great deal of sense to me. What did you make of that specific sort of point Conor raised?
That was one of the biggest talking points for me, really, and one I'm glad you brought up, because you've provided a 270-page document. That's a lot of evidence. I mean, I'd imagine there's so many topics where they've gone into great amounts of detail with it. And then for them to come out and just have a completely different reasoning for it that essentially just dismisses the 270-page document. I mean, you don't have to be a lawyer or a solicitor or anyone to know that that doesn't add up. You don't have to be like a massive detective to know that something's not right there. The egg thing, I find mental that it's almost a guess, because other fighters, they've said, have in the same substance have had high amount of sort of like egg consumption, and they've essentially just guessed that it could be that. So there's no definitive answer. The fact no one has read the document, the fact he won't provide it to the British Boxing Board of Control, I've genuinely I've almost got no words for it. Like, he's so adamant that he's been tampered with, and that it wasn't intentional, but he's not given us like sort of damning reasoning. Like, there's no evidence on the table that he can put down, even say it was like in a court of law, that he can put down and go, there you go, there's the proof. So I just don't understand why they'd go to the length of a 270-page document for then it just be thrown out. It genuinely baffled me. And the eggs, I'm not buying that for a second. Something stupid, it was like 34 eggs a day or something ridiculous. Not happening.
Yeah, the egg stuff is quite funny. Just I wonder what your thoughts are on this, because I think it's a bit strange. So he's been not cleared by the WBC, but he said you can return to the rankings, you can fight for our titles, whatever. And yet he said he doesn't intend to fight in Britain. He's got no interest in regaining a British boxing control license. So my question to you is, and it's sort of what I'm pointing was, what's the point in this then? If you're not trying to prove your case to Britain, to the British Boxing Board of Control, you could say, and you're clear to fight by the WBC, is this just all him PR motivated, trying to clear his image in the fans, in the eyes of boxers, in the eyes of fans? What do you think is the motivator for this? If he, as he says in his words, he doesn't see himself fighting in Britain for the foreseeable future, what's the point in all this?
There isn't one. He's used the excuses of, again, in the interview, and I've seen him mentioning it, how his dad tore up his license, but that was for completely different reasons. So just because your dad did it doesn't mean you have to do it. I find that absolutely ridiculous, and that's another get out. I don't really see the point. You know, he wanted this massive fight with Chris Eubank Jr., arguably probably top 3, top 5 biggest domestic clashes we've seen on these shores for a long, long time. Not necessarily in terms of the actual sort of like the actual fight itself, but the build up, the Eubank, the Benn names, the history of the family. You know, the build up to that was mental. It was so much hype around it. So to throw that away is mental. You know, he keeps calling people out. He's even said to like Eubank, "I'm coming for you," but yeah, I'm coming for you, but you have to come to me abroad because I'm refusing to fight in Britain because I can't provide the evidence to keep the British Boxing Board of Control happy. Everything just loops back around in a circle with Benn. So I just think it's pointless, really, because at some point, you're going to have to fight a big domestic fight, especially at the stage of his career he's at, where he's not quite at the world level. Who realistically is going to pay for a major domestic clash in Abu Dhabi or Dubai or Saudi Arabia or something? It just really doesn't make sense to me, and I just don't see the point. But I think the point of it is it's a get out clause for him. He can still earn loads of money, protest his innocence, and move on with his career.
So judging by the protest his innocence, I think what way you lean in terms of his overall guilt or innocence. I'll not press you on that specifically, but we saw recently news this week that Felix Sturm, obviously former German middleweight world champion, has been actually sentenced to jail in Germany for breaking doping laws. I just want to get your thoughts on, because it all looks like Benn will be back in action. His career is not going to take. Then obviously his reputation will, but in a completely fair world, what do you think? And we're not saying necessarily Conor Benn specifically here, but is this a sort of bad reflection, the state of doping when you've got here where there seems to be no punishment even in the sport, let alone legally, where you've seen someone actually sentenced to jail over in Germany for potentially a lesser offence?
Yeah, I think, we'll see Conor Benn fight. I'm actually glad for once the British Boxing Board of Control are taking a stance, because we've seen it even, Fury's, Canelo's. You get caught doping, you either find a random excuse that because you've got loads of money and you're a massive name, it's bought, or you take a 6-month ban, you take a 12-month ban, you come back, you win a couple of fights, everyone forgets about it. So I wouldn't necessarily say jail sentence. I mean, I can see where they're coming from, because like Conor Benn said himself in the interview, especially, with what happened with Nigel and Gerald McClellan, it is a sport where you can kill someone. So if you're doping to make yourself, I don't know, either better stamina or more punch power, if you're cheating to potentially damage someone to the extent where they could be killed, then maybe a jail term isn't overly excessive. I think it should be banned for life if you're caught. If you're a cheat, you're a cheat. Simple. But yeah, I do think we're quite lenient with it in this country, and like I think Conor Benn, we will see him in a boxing ring again. I don't necessarily agree with it, but money talks, unfortunately.
It certainly does. Owen, we could go on all night, but we'll wrap it up there. Thanks a million for coming on, mate. I'm sure there'll be plenty more updates for this story in the coming days, weeks. There's chat of Benn, Pacquiao, and God knows what else, but I'm sure we'll discuss it again soon. Thanks everyone for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that. Cheers.
Cheers, boys.